Let's roll back to the early 1990s, a decade when the world was beginning to take pollution seriously. Governments and environmental agencies across the globe were tightening the screws on emission standards. Suddenly, the beloved two-stroke engine, the heart of so many dirt bikes, enduro racers, and backyard legends, was in real trouble. What once symbolized freedom, simplicity, and raw mechanical beauty was now being labeled dirty. Smoky exhaust, unburned fuel, and that distinct blue haze filling the air became the enemy of environmental reform. In the United States, the crackdown had already begun. Two-strokes were banned from public roads, and even off-road riding was coming under fire. California, always the trendsetter in regulation, was preparing to extend its emissions laws to trail bikes, and everyone in the industry knew if California succeeded, the rest of the nation would soon follow. For Honda, that was more than just a problem. It was an existential threat. The company had built its off-road reputation on dependable, high-performance machines that riders trusted. Losing the right to sell two-strokes in America meant losing market share, credibility, and decades of loyalty from riders who grew up with those red tanks and screaming engines. So, what could they do? Honda's answer was nothing short of radical. A revolutionary, never-before-seen, big, smoking rally bike. And that's where our story begins, with the birth of the Honda EXP-2. By 1995, Honda's engineers were ready to take a gamble. A bold, almost defiant experiment that would challenge everything people thought they knew about two-strokes. They called it the EXP-2, short for experimental two-stroke, and it wasn't just another dirt bike. It was a statement, a laboratory on wheels. Honda's biggest research effort ever to prove that the two-stroke engine could be clean, efficient, and reliable enough to survive in a world that was turning against it. The heart of this machine was a brand new 402 cubic centimeter two-stroke engine, designed specifically for desert endurance and rally competition. Every inch of it was hand-built with purpose. The frame was a mix of aluminum tubes and sheets, welded together by hand to keep it both light and incredibly strong. The rear subframe, seat, and fenders were borrowed straight from Honda's legendary CR500, a clever move to save time and money while maintaining off-road toughness. Up front, a full Showa suspension setup gave it the stability and control needed for long-distance punishment. But what really made jaws drop was the technology packed inside. The EXP-2 featured a counterbalancer to smooth out vibration, something few two-strokes ever had, and an early form of fuel injection, at a time when nearly every other smoker still relied on a carburetor. To put this radical new concept to the test, Honda compared it to their Dakar Dominator, the mighty NXR 750, a four-stroke monster that had already conquered Africa. On paper, the EXP-2 looked outmatched. Smaller engine, less horsepower, half the displacement. But Honda didn't build it to win races on specs. They built it to prove a point, to show the world that the two-stroke still had fight left in it. When Honda lined up the EXP-2 against its own Dakar legend, the NXR 750, the difference on paper was almost comical. The big four-stroke NXR packed 750 cubic centimeters of displacement and 71 horsepower, a proven desert dominator with multiple rally wins under its belt. The little EXP-2, just 402 cubic centimeters and 54 horsepower, barely 3/4 the muscle. But here's where things got interesting. Both engines made the same 50 pound-feet of torque, and the two-stroke weighed nearly 110 pounds less. Suddenly, the power-to-weight ratio was dead even. Even more shocking, the EXP-2's experimental design and early fuel injection system made it more fuel-efficient than the four-stroke. Its tanks could be smaller, its body narrower, its handling sharper. Riders quickly realized this wasn't a fragile prototype. It was a knife-edge racer built for the brutal open desert. And yes, the rumors were true. That little Japanese two-stroke actually burned less fuel than Honda's own four-stroke Rally King. In 1995, That was almost unthinkable. So Honda did what Honda always does when it wants answers. They took it racing. The 1995 Dakar rally stretched more than 5,000 miles across sand, stone, and hellish heat, the world's toughest endurance event. Most experts thought a two-stroke wouldn't make it 500 miles before seizing or running dry. But day after day, the EXP-2 kept charging. It sipped fuel, stayed cool, and simply refused to quit. By the time the dust settled, Honda's prototype had won the sub-500cc class and finished an astonishing 5th overall, beating dozens of larger, more powerful machines. And the success didn't stop there. At the Baja 1000, it dominated its class again, finishing 7th overall, and at the Nevada Rally, it took the two-stroke crown and 8th overall. For a hand-built test mule, those results were unheard of. Honda's little experiment had gone toe-to-toe with the toughest bikes on Earth and proved that a two-stroke could survive and even thrive in the most punishing races known to man. After such an incredible debut, everyone expected Honda to double down, send the EXP-2 back to Dakar, refine it, and chase the overall victory. But instead, something strange happened. Just as quickly as it had appeared, Honda pulled the plug. No more rallies, no follow-up prototypes, no press tours. The EXP-2 disappeared almost overnight. It wasn't because the bike broke down or because the program ran out of money. No, the truth was far more interesting. Honda had already achieved exactly what it set out to do. The EXP-2 was never built to win Dakar. Winning was just a side effect. Its true mission was far bigger, to prove that a two-stroke engine could still have a future. To show that with the right engineering, it could run cleaner, more efficient, and more reliable than anyone believed possible. But that raised another question, one that puzzled fans and journalists alike. Wait a second, wasn't Honda the company that swore off two-strokes entirely? They weren't wrong. Soichiro Honda himself had dismissed the two-stroke design as a dead end decades earlier. To him, the future belonged to the four-stroke, smooth, civilized, efficient. Yet by the mid-1990s, business realities couldn't be ignored. Half the world's motorcycles still used two-strokes, and Honda simply couldn't stand by while that massive market and its legacy faded away. Behind the EXP-2's miracle was a man few riders had ever heard of, Yoichi Ishibashi, Honda's chief R&D engineer and one of the most quietly determined minds in the company's history. While the world was ready to bury the two-stroke, Ishibashi refused to let it die. He believed that with the right science, the engine's so-called dirty habits could be cleaned up once and for all. His vision wasn't born overnight. It traced back decades, inspired by the early combustion theories of Yakov Zeldovich in the 1930s and later by experimental work done at Toyota in the 1970s. Ishibashi's mission was simple but daunting. Make the two-stroke burn cleaner without losing its punch. The core problem was well known among engineers. Traditional two-strokes had two fatal flaws. First, at low RPM, they didn't completely burn their air-fuel mixture, leaving behind clouds of unburned hydrocarbons. Second, during the scavenging process, a portion of fresh fuel always slipped out through the exhaust port before combustion even began. That wasted fuel not only polluted the air, but also wrecked fuel economy. Ishibashi's answer was something called ARC, active radical combustion. The concept was revolutionary. When fuel inside the cylinder reached a precise combination of pressure and temperature, part of the mixture broke down into unstable molecules called active radicals. These radicals, when combined with the residual hot gases left from the previous combustion cycle, triggered auto-ignition, a spontaneous, uniform burn that occurred throughout the chamber all at once. Instead of a flame front slowly spreading from the spark plug, the entire charge ignited almost simultaneously. The result? Cleaner, faster, and far more efficient combustion. But controlling that chaos was the real magic. Auto ignition usually leads to knocking and engine damage, yet Ishibashi found a way to tame it. He added a pressure control valve to the exhaust port, essentially adjusting the height of the port opening by up to 90% in real time. This allowed him to regulate cylinder pressure with precision, deciding exactly when and how the mixture would ignite. The ARC system only worked under certain conditions, between about 6 and 22% of engine load, which, conveniently, was the range where traditional two-strokes polluted the most. When the engine wasn't in that sweet spot, like at idle or full throttle, the spark plug simply took over as usual, and the numbers spoke for themselves. Under ARC operation, carbon monoxide and dioxide dropped by roughly 15%. Unburned hydrocarbons fell by 80%, and nitrogen oxides were reduced by a staggering 90%. Throttle response improved, torque at low revs increased, and vibration was drastically reduced thanks to the counterbalancer. When the system was active, the EXP-2's engine made a peculiar sound, a clattering noise reminiscent of a small diesel. As Ishibashi himself joked, when it rattles, it's working. To make all of this possible, Honda's engineers had to push electronics into territory few two-strokes had ever seen. The EXP-2 featured pneumatic fuel injection controlled by an ECU that constantly read inputs from a throttle position sensor, an engine speed sensor, and even a knock sensor. For 1995, that was space-age technology on a dirt bike. In the end, Ishibashi had created something extraordinary. A two-stroke that could match, and sometimes outperform, a four-stroke in efficiency and cleanliness. For a brief moment, it seemed like he had found the key to saving the two-stroke engine from extinction. As brilliant as it was, the EXP-2 project was never meant to last. Ishibashi's breakthrough came with some heavy baggage, both technical and financial. The ARC system worked beautifully in theory, but only within a narrow performance window. Outside that sweet spot, roughly between 6 and 22% engine load, the magic simply faded away. For everyday use, that made it unpredictable and difficult to refine. Then came the cost. Each EXP-2 prototype was said to cost between $250,000 and $500,000 to build, an astonishing figure for a motorcycle in the mid-1990s. Hand-built frames, complex sensors, custom injection systems, none of it could ever translate into mass production. Even if Honda wanted to, there was no way a commercial two-stroke could sell at a price riders would accept. Add to that the tangle of electronics, the ECU, sensors, and exhaust valves, and you had a machine that was as delicate as it was advanced. In the dust and mud of the real world, that complexity became a liability. Still, Honda made one last attempt. In 1997, they introduced the CRM 250AR, a dual sport bike using a simplified version of Ishibashi's ARC technology. It was light, powerful, and impressively clean burning for a smoker. But by 1999, it was gone. New EPA and Euro emissions laws came down even harder, and ARC simply couldn't keep up. At the same time, Yamaha launched the YZ400F, a four-stroke that proved riders were ready for something new, stronger, quieter, easier to maintain. Honda took the hint. They shifted their focus entirely to their four-stroke CRF lineup, leaving the EXP-2 and its radical technology behind. Though the ARC project was shelved, its spirit didn't die. Honda quietly repurposed much of what they had learned from the EXP-2, the hand-built frames, the fuel systems, the testing equipment, and poured it into their next great challenge, Baja racing. In many ways, the EXP-2 was the seed that grew into Honda's desert dynasty. Its DNA lived on in machines like the XR650R and later the CRF 450X, bikes that would go on to dominate the Baja 1000 for years. The lessons learned from that strange, smoky experiment in 1995 became the foundation for a generation of four-stroke desert racers. The EXP-2 may not have saved the two-stroke world, but it proved something even more important, that Honda still had the courage to dream big, to experiment wildly, and to defy what everyone said was impossible. It was a reminder of the company's golden era, when engineers were free to chase ideas that seemed crazy until they worked. With today's technology, you can't help but wonder, why hasn't anyone tried to bring ARC back? Maybe the cost, maybe the patents, or maybe, just maybe, no one has dared to take that leap again. If you remember the days when Honda built machines that truly dared to be different, share your memories in the comments. Give this video a like if you miss that fearless Honda spirit, and subscribe so you won't miss our next deep dive into the legends that shaped motorcycling history.